Hey y'all, it's Ned over at My Philippine Dreams, M to the E to the D over at MPD, coming at you from Dumaguete City, the city of gentle people, Negros Oriental. How to lose money in the Philippines. First up, charitable giving. What I'm going to be doing here is just going over the history and the process of our charitable giving projects. If you've been following our channel, you'll know that we've been involved in some projects over the last few years. And I just want to try to touch briefly on the status of where it's at, where it's been, and where it might be going. First up, it all started with the kids in the neighborhood showing up, using our yard, running around, playing games and all that. Michelle decided to start up an after-school program, so when the kids came home from school, they'd swing by the house and she'd have them out on the front porch doing school stuff. And with all the school supplies, that's where we started up our first fundraiser. After that, we had the first Jollibee party. Some of you might remember that. Some of you might have gone to that. Following that, we had the house building, where we built a house for two of the families that were displaced from our neighborhood because they got evicted, because they needed to smash down the house to build a road. Following that, Michelle and Dina had two other spaghetti fests. We had just recently had another Jollibee party. And we also had some other situations where we had to deal with one of the fathers of one of the families getting really sick, and they asked us to provide some initial medication, which we did. We also are involved in a couple other fundraisers. There's the Living in Cebu Forums, which has the Sick Child Fund, which we give to every year. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. First up, if you're going to do charitable giving, I really think transparency and having skin in the game is really important. If you're going to have legitimacy, if you're going to see people, have people see you as a real entity, somebody who's honest and is operating with some integrity, there are a number of things that you have to do in order to maintain that transparency and maintain that integrity. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. Talking about skin in the game, when we first started getting donations, we really didn't have a whole lot of skin in the game. Yeah, actually, when the first school supplies that we bought, we purchased out of pocket. But following that, it was basically subscribers donating money specifically for that. The Jollibee party, the same thing. Then we got into the house building. When people found out and subscribers found out that the families were being evicted in our neighborhood and they had seen the kids every day, doing the school program and all that, they said, "Hey, Ned, is there something that we can do?" I had some serious misgivings about undertaking a project of that scope. And I talked to Michelle at length about it and talked to some other people. And we finally ended up doing it. Thankfully, it turned out to be a roaring success. Again, it's one of my favorite memories. I know I haven't done my 2-year update in the Philippines, but if we were doing like my top 3 favorite memories of my time here, that would definitely be one of them. Is not only that, but most of our charitable giving stuff. Taking on the house building, and I think the house building ended up costing about $2,500 US, and that was for 2 families to live there. That cost about $2,500, and that's when we really started putting skin into the game, because although we were tracking the donations, although we were doing our best to account for every single centavo that was not only coming in but also going out by maintaining receipts and having Junjun do all that stuff, I really felt that we needed to be a part of it. So of that $2,500, Michelle, myself, and my parents, hi Mom and Dad, donated about $400 into that project. So that came out of our pockets. After that, again, we tried to maintain skin in the game. Instead of just relying on subscribers donating money and maintaining that transparency, we wanted to really be a big part of that. So when Michelle and Dina decided to do the Spaghetti Fest, we paid for all of that out of pocket. They cost about $30 each. We got about 50, 60 meals out of them. So those 2 Spaghetti Fests cost about $30 each, so that's an additional $60. Again, having skin in the game. You can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. You got to be involved, you got to have something invested. Recently we had the Jollibee party that cost $158. Michelle and I paid for half of that, which was about $78. When one of the fathers of one of the families got sick, and I'm not going to say any names because the kids do watch this channel, they came by and asked us for some help. They wanted us to shoulder the cost of the medications, which were pretty expensive. So Michelle and I kicked in for that, and that was about 3,000 pesos, which is about $66 US. That was the only time they asked us for any help with his medical issues. And on the flip side, he seems to be doing a lot better. Yay! The Living in Cebu Forums, the Sick Child Fund, what they're doing is there's a gentleman named Fred up there who lives in Cebu, and he is accepting donations, and they're basically sponsoring kids that are dealing with cancer at Cebu City Doctors Hospital, I believe. Again, the transparency is there. He's also very well known on the forum. He's also very well known in Cebu. So his integrity is without question, so we have no problem donating to that. Last year it was $88 US, and this year we'll be donating some money, actually, probably heading up there this weekend. So again, talking about having skin in the game, when you're doing charitable programs, I believe a sign of success is that you're losing money, because you have to have that investment in it personally. So the grand total for all our charitable giving projects that came out of our pockets was about $692. Now let's talk about transparency. When I first started accepting donations, I didn't know how to track them. So what I did was because I wanted to maintain people's anonymity. People would donate money, but I'm sure they didn't want their names being bandied around. So I started off listing out the date and the amount. I also told people to send in an odd amount of money, like $23.33, so that they could track it. So as the donations came in, I listed them out on our website. The list out is still there. The list is there. But over time, that kind of changed, that kind of morphed. And at this point, what I'm doing now is when somebody donates money, I'm listing out the date, the person's full first name, their last initial, and the amount. Again, for transparency and for accountability. You also have to track the receipts. When you're doing all this stuff, you got to get receipts from Jollibee, you got to get receipts from the construction companies, and again, luckily with Junjun heading up the purchasing of all the materials and all the stock, what he'd do is he'd jump on his scooter and he'd run around to different places canvassing, what he called canvassing here in the Philippines, looking for the lowest prices and the best deal. So he not only did he save us money, but he was very, very OCD when it came to maintaining the receipts and tracking all of the expenses, which was a big help. Personally, I have no problem sharing what I have with other people. I have spent my money on far worse things in my past than building houses, having parties, and doing little spaghetti fests for the homeless people in Dumaguete City. So I don't see it as a big deal. Also, as you've seen from my videos on giving to the poor, when the street kids come up to me, I usually throw them 3 to 5 pesos. I don't see that as a big deal. Or if there's a food stand nearby, get them some food. It's basically the haves going to the have-nots. It's the way this economy is structured. It's the way the Philippines is structured. You have your very wealthy and you have your very poor, and that's just the way it is. So I think it's important to do what you can with what you have to try to make the world a better place. And what's great about especially the house building, there was so many donations that came in for that it basically became the house the world built. I mean, there was people from Norway, Sweden, the European Union, Australia, UK, everywhere, Mexico, Japan, OFWs, and Saudi Arabia and Qatar were sending in money. It was really great. And again, I did the best that I could do to track all that money. Finally, let's talk about PayPal and the donation system that they have. They got a pretty good hustle going in. Every time you donate money, they take they charge me 30 cents for a processing fee, and then they take another 2.9% of whatever was donated on top of that. Now, when we were first getting donations and stuff, I was trying to keep track of all those deductions that PayPal was taking, their own cut, and keeping that separate from our running total. But after a while, I was like, you know what? I'll just eat the cost. I'll eat every time somebody donates. I'll take the 30 cents out of my pocket and the 2.9% of it, and I'll just make up the difference. So once again, it's a matter of losing money to charitable giving and being invested, having skin in the game, and being willing to do what it takes to maintain accountability and integrity. So that's enough of me babbling on about our charitable giving programs. If you have experience in charitable giving programs, please share them. If you got some good things that happen well, things that happen badly, contribute to the discussion. Until next time, this is Ned over My Philippine Dreams. Take care.